The roar of the crowd was deafening, a hungry sea of voices that echoed to the ancient stone Colosseum. Dust swirled in the hot air, thick with the scent of blood and sweat. Thousands of spectators pressed toward the edge of their seats, watching the arena with gleaming eyes and savage anticipation. The sun sat high above, casting harsh light over the sandpit below, where battles were fought and legends broken. He stood at the center of it, unarmed. His chest rose and fell with each breath, deliberate but heavy. His hands, scarred and calloused, curled into fists. No shield, no blade, nothing but the leather straps across his chest and the iron determination in his eyes. The silence between roars felt personal, as if the whole Colosseum paused just long enough to mock him. She emerged from the opposite gate like thunder on legs, a giantess of a woman, carved from muscle and menace. Her armor gleamed black under the sun. Each step she took sent small vibrations through the sand. In one hand, she carried a double-edged sword, its blade already stained from previous victories. In the other, a round shield that bore deep scars from battles past. Her reputation preceded her. No mercy, no hesitation, no equals. He met her eyes and did not flinch. The trumpets called, sharp and final. The gate behind him sealed with a heavy clang. It began. She didn't wait. Her stride turned to a charge, her blade slicing through air with wicked intent. He sidestepped the first strike, barely, the edge catching the loose leather on his shoulder. He stumbled back, barefoot on burning sand, heart thudding in rhythm with the crowd's chants. She grinned a fierce, terrifying smile. To her, this wasn't a fight. It was a slaughter. She toyed with him at first, a flurry of swings meant to intimidate, not kill. He dodged, ducked, tried to find an opening. There was none. He lunged forward once, hoping to disarm her or grab her wrist, but her knee met his ribs like a battering ram. He crumpled to the ground, gasping, dust clinging to his lips. She stood over him, raised her sword, and hesitated, not for mercy, but for show. The crowd ate it up. A voice rang from the stands. Throw him to the dogs. Others joined in, laughing, jeering. Somewhere in the upper rows, a nobleman spilled wine as he pointed and cackled. She lowered the sword, kicked him onto his back, and sneered. You're not even worth the steel. Then, with a heave, she lifted him by his tunic and flung him across the sand like discarded meat. His body hit the ground with a dull thud. Limbs sprawled awkwardly, pain blooming in his spine like fire. The gate creaked open again, this time not to welcome Victor, but to eject the waste. He was dragged by faceless guards, arms trailing, his consciousness fading in waves. The crowd was already turning their attention to the next fight. He was forgotten, irrelevant. Darkness swallowed him. Time passed without name or number. He awoke not in the infirmary, but beneath the arena, in the tunnels where the dead were stripped of value before burial. Stone walls bled moisture, and the air was thick with rot and decay. His breath came raggedly, and each movement summoned sharp reminders of every bruise, every cracked rib. He tried to sit, failed, tried again. Pain greeted him like an old friend. In the distance, he heard the muffled roar of the crowd above. Another fight, another man chasing glory or death. Here, beneath the spectacle, all that remained were the bones of those who failed. And yet he was not dead. Why? He turned his head and caught sight of something glinting faintly in the shadows. A sword broken, but not useless. Beside it, an old cuirass and a battered helmet. Relics of a forgotten warrior. Or perhaps one discarded too soon. His fingers dragged across the cold stone toward it. When they finally closed around the hilt, something in him shifted. Not hope, not yet, but something like breath. He pulled the sword close, examining the cracks in its edge. Imperfect, flawed, just like him. He strapped the armor piece by piece onto his sore body, each buckle a defiant declaration. The fit wasn't perfect, but it would do. It had to. He staggered to his feet. The mirror on the wall, if it could be called that, was no longer a man beaten. It was someone stripped bare of illusions. No more honor, no more pride, just will. She had thrown him like trash. But trash doesn't get back up. He took one step forward. then another, toward the narrow stairwell that led back to the world of the living. Every bone protested, but he kept moving. The weight of the sword in his hand grew familiar, comfortable. His fingers curled tighter around it, as if the blade remembered his touch. He didn't need cheers. He didn't need vengeance. He needed to stand. And when he did, the world above would have to look at him again, not as a broken man, but as the one they buried too soon. The stone door at the top of the stairs groaned open, just a crack. Dust swirled in from the outside light. He paused at the threshold, armor catching a faint glimmer of the sun. Then he smiled just slightly. 5 minutes. That's all it took to fall. And now it begins. The stone beneath his boots whispered of forgotten footsteps, each echo rebounding like a ghost trapped in the narrow passageway. The air was dry, but beneath the weight of armor, sweat pooled across his back. Light filtered in only through jagged cracks above, bleeding silver across his path as he moved deeper into the underbelly of the Colosseum. The roar of the crowd above dulled into a low hum, like distant thunder too proud to be ignored. His breath came steady now. The pain hadn't vanished, but it had changed, no longer something that anchored him, but something that pushed. Every sting in his ribs, every jolt of bruised muscle reminded him of who he was, who she had made him. He adjusted the sword on his back. Its scabbard was mismatched, the leather old and brittle, but it held. The blade, though chipped and dulled, was still a weapon. He had spent hours in the darkness below, testing its balance, relearning the weight of steel in his palm. A man without a weapon is a prisoner. A man with a weapon, even a broken one, is a question mark waiting to be answered. No one had seen him yet. That much he was certain of. These corridors were thought to be sealed, forgotten by most. Only the gravediggers, the desperate, and the vermin knew of them. He moved like shadow, unseen, unheard, a relic come to life. He reached a wall, cracked, ancient, but still bearing the marks of carved names. Dozens, hundreds, warriors etched into stone by trembling fingers or reverent hands. Most were faded, illegible, but his eyes lingered on one, only half eroded by time. Kaelus, his name. He touched it briefly, fingers brushing over rough letters. Not long ago, he'd carved it himself. Back then it had meant pride. Legacy. Now it was just a gravestone, and he wasn't in it. Somewhere above, the horns blew again, another match. Another soul fed to the crowd. He wondered if she was watching, seated among nobles or sharpening her blade for the next show. Perhaps she was drinking to her own legend, retelling how she'd humiliated the once-famed Kaelus in front of the Empire. He hoped so. He found an exit not far beyond the engraved wall, a disused maintenance shaft leading toward the gladiator quarters. He didn't rush. Every step was part of something larger now, not just a return but a reckoning. The door creaked open, and he emerged into a vacant corridor. Moonlight now replaced sunlight, streaming through narrow slits. The scent of oil and leather lingered here, alongside the faint tinge of blood soaked into the stones. He passed empty rooms, cells really, where fighters once prayed or wept before entering the arena. They were silent now, abandoned since the latest slaughter. One door hung open, the hinges broken. Inside, a cot sat overturned, and the walls bore the marks of fists and desperation. He paused only to grab a thicker tunic from a trunk, wrapping it beneath his armor for padding. Every edge mattered. Footsteps approached. He ducked into the shadows, crouching behind the doorway. Two voices murmured, their tone casual. Guards making rounds, speaking of the matches, of wagers placed, of blood spilled. One mentioned her by name. Valira made it look easy again. Barely broke a sweat. Valira. So that was her name. Until now, she had been only a symbol in his mind. A predator in armor, a weapon with a face. The name made her real, and somehow that made her vulnerable. He let them pass, silent as death. Then he continued forward, making his way to the lower barracks, a place forbidden to those no longer under contract. He was long past contracts now. At the far end of the chamber was what he came for, an armory sealed to all but ranking warriors. The lock was heavy, but rusted. It didn't take long to force it open, the metal snapping with a grunt and a twist. Inside, rows of weapons lined the walls, all gleaming in muted candlelight. These were tools of death polished for show, each blade a mirror, each spear a statement. But he didn't want new. He found what he was looking for at the back, a weathered chest marked with fading insignia, a serpent swallowing its own tail. His old symbol. Few would remember it now. That suited him fine. Inside lay his armor. Not the grand ceremonial set gifted to him during his rise, but the one he forged in the fire of real battle. Steel etched with scars, a breastplate shaped by both hammer and blood. He stripped off the scavenged gear and redressed himself in memory. Every piece clicked into place like a heartbeat regaining rhythm. When he cinched the final strap, he stood taller. Kaelus was back. He caught his reflection in a polished shield. Older, harder, eyes colder than they had ever been. Not a hero, not anymore. The arena had cured him of that illusion. He exited the armory in silence. Still no alarms, no cries. The world above had no idea he was breathing, let alone moving like a shadow across their sacred halls. He took one last turn and found himself near the lift, an ancient platform that could carry warriors directly to the arena's heart. It would be guarded, or worse, locked down for night. But when he arrived, there was no one. The lift stood open, a gift unclaimed. He stepped onto it, gripped the rusted chain, and began to crank. Slowly, the mechanism creaked to life, lifting him inch by inch. His muscles burned, but he didn't stop. His heart was calm now. Every pulse beat to a singular purpose. As he rose, he could hear them again, the crowd. Louder now, alive with bloodlust. The clang of steel, the screech of blades against armor. Another fight was already underway. He could feel the vibrations in the floor, the rhythm of war being played above his head. The lift stopped. A narrow hallway stretched ahead, leading to the arena gates. Torches lined the walls, flickering against the ancient stone. He advanced, boots thudding with deliberate cadence. A guard stood by the gate, startled to see him, mouth half open to speak. Kaelus didn't wait. A quick strike to the throat, a muffled gasp, and the man crumpled silently to the floor. No alarms, no sound. The gate ahead now stood unguarded. He looked up. There, on the other side of the gate, was the sand, golden under torchlight, scarred with fresh blood. Two fighters circled each other, oblivious of the shadow just beyond their world. He leaned close to the gate, then pushed it open. No fanfare, no announcement, just a return of something that never truly died. He stepped onto the sand and let the door close behind him. The crowd didn't notice at first, too engrossed in the fight at the center. But a few began to see him, turning their heads, their cheers faltering. Confusion spread like fire. Whispers became murmurs, then shouts. He didn't look at them. He only looked at the fighters in front of him. One turned toward him, startled. The other followed, and both backed away when they saw the sword in his hand. The emblem on his armor, the unrelenting certainty in his eyes. The crowd began to chant again, but this time it was uncertain, disjointed. They didn't know what they were witnessing, but she would. Valira would see, and when she did, he would make sure she remembered the exact moment her legend began to crumble. He raised his sword, not as a challenger, but as a consequence. The air in the arena shifted the moment Kaelus raised his sword. A silence spread through the amphitheater like a dropped veil, muffling even the drunken shouts from the upper tiers. Sand clung to his boots, hot beneath his soles, every grain steeped in blood from countless fallen warriors. And yet, in this moment, it felt as if the entire Colosseum belonged only to him, not because of who he was, but because of what he had become. The two fighters in the center, seasoned men by the look of their stances, had retreated several steps, uncertainty etched into their every movement. Their duel forgotten, they now eyed him like a wild beast that had wandered into their sanctuary, dangerous, unpredictable, and wholly unwelcome. Kaelus didn't speak. He didn't need to. One of the fighters, a lean, hawk-nosed man in scaled armor, moved first, circling slowly, sword lowered but ready. His partner hesitated, then flanked left, hoping to divide Kaelus' attention. It might have worked once, but Kaelus had seen every feint, every angle, every shade of fear behind a fighter's eyes. These men were professional. He was something else. He advanced without warning, moving with an abruptness that shocked him into motion. A parry clashed against his blade, the other strike glancing off his shoulder armor. He barely noticed. His riposte was brutal, a downward blow that shattered the hawk-nosed man's guard, sending him sprawling. A pivot, a twist of his wrist, and the second fighter was on the ground, clutching a slashed thigh, unable to rise. The crowd roared, not in joy, not yet. It was a roar of confusion, awe, fear. They didn't know if this was sanctioned or sacrilege, but the arena didn't care. It had seen gods and traitors, martyrs and monsters, and it welcomed them all. Kaelus stood over the two fallen men, neither dead, neither dangerous. He turned away from them and looked up at the high dais, where the nobles sat in their cloaks and crowns, shielded from the sun and the smell of death. There, among them, dressed in obsidian and silver, sat Valira. She leaned forward, elbows resting on the edge of the stone balcony, her face unreadable. For a heartbeat, no one else existed in that place. Just the two of them, joined by a thread drawn taut across time. She rose. It was a simple motion, but the effect was immediate. Her entourage grew quiet. A servant flinched back from pouring wine, and the crowd, sensing something titanic looming, hushed in waves. Kaelus didn't move. He wanted her to come to him. He needed her to, and she did. With a gesture, Valira descended the stairs of the dais, not in haste, but with the surety of a queen entering her throne room. Her armor gleamed in the fading light, a dark mirror to Kaelus' battered steel. She wore no helmet, never had. Her face, fierce and unmarred, was her declaration of dominance. As she reached the sand, a herald stepped forward, unsure, voice trembling. "Commander Valira, this fight was not." She raised a hand. The man fell silent. Then, slowly, she walked toward Kaelus, stopping a dozen paces away. "You're dead," she said. It wasn't disbelief. It was disappointment. Kaelus tilted his head. "You didn't kill me." Her eyes flicked to his armor. Recognition danced in their depths, though she masked it well. "You shouldn't be here." "I am," he replied. "I didn't come for a rematch." She smirked. "Good. You'd lose again." That old fury flared behind her words, the same fire he'd seen that day in the pit. But something else lived in her voice now, a tightness, a crack in the certainty. "I came," he said, "because you left me alive. You should have finished it." Valira's lips parted, then closed. A flicker of something passed behind her eyes, then vanished. "You were nothing, a broken toy tossed aside." "Now I'm back," he said, "and I'm not broken anymore." She glanced around the arena. The crowd was transfixed. The guards hadn't moved. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a spectacle. Every noble, every merchant, every soldier was watching. Kaelus knew she wouldn't back down. Not here. Not when her legend was being weighed in the open. "You're challenging me?" she asked. "Here? Now?" "I'm not here to challenge," Kaelus replied. "I'm here to end something that never should have started." Silence stretched between them like a drawn bow. Then Valira drew her sword. The sound of it unsheathing was like thunder in a stormless sky. The arena erupted, not in panic, but in hunger. This was what they came for. Not sanctioned matches, not show fights, but real battles. Legends colliding. Kaelus stepped forward. She met him in the center. No referee called the start. No horn signaled the clash. The world simply tilted, and the two forces met with steel and rage. Her strike came fast, too fast for most to track, but Kaelus caught it, the force rattling up his arm. She followed with a low sweep, a feint into a pivot, her blade arcing for his neck. He ducked, rolled, came up swinging. She parried, boots skidding across the sand. Their styles were different now. Hers refined, honed by years of power and dominance. His, brutal, efficient, born in darkness and sharpened in isolation. She moved like a dancer. He moved like a storm. They broke apart after a dozen exchanges, circling. Both were breathing heavier now. "You've improved," she said, almost grudgingly. "You made me," he replied. She lunged again, a whirlwind of steel and precision. He countered, but her strike grazed his ribs, drawing blood. Pain flared, but he welcomed it. He needed it to stay sharp. He retaliated, hammering her guard with sheer force, backing her step by step toward the shadowed gate she had once dragged him through like trash. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. With a snarl, she twisted, changed angles, nearly caught him at the knee. He kicked her back, the impact sending her staggering. Sand flew. The crowd was on its feet now, a tidal wave of sound crashing over the arena. Kaelus pressed the attack. Each swing was calculated to test her reflexes, each pause a trap. She deflected, dodged, adapted, but there was a crack in her armor now, not physical, but psychological. She hadn't expected this. Not from him. They locked swords, faces inches apart. "You don't get to haunt me," she hissed. "You never buried me," he growled. With a grunt, they shoved apart again. Dust swirled. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the battlefield. Valira's stance shifted. More defensive now. Kaelus narrowed his eyes. She was buying time. Not to escape. To think. "You're hesitating," he said. "No," she replied. "I'm deciding how much of you I want left when I win." And she charged again, this time with renewed fury. Their swords met like clashing thunderheads. Sparks flew. Blood dripped from both. Yet neither yielded. But Kaelus wasn't fighting for dominance anymore. He wasn't fighting for a crowd or vengeance or legacy. He was fighting to show everyone, that the monster she thought she destroyed still breathed. And he remembered what it felt like to rise. As the crowd leaned in, shouting and chanting and drowning in spectacle, the battle raged on. Steel screamed. Breath caught. And through it all, Kaelus stood unbroken, blade in hand, eyes locked on the one who had once cast him aside like refuse. But not anymore. Now, the reckoning had begun. The arena pulsed with primal energy, a living thing bristling beneath the weight of violence and spectacle. Kaelus and Valira moved like avatars of war, their blades flashing through golden dusk as the sky above bled into twilight. The world had narrowed, just the two of them locked in a private battle, made public by the hungry stares of thousands. But to Kaelus, the crowd no longer mattered. This was no performance. This was conclusion. Valira was tiring. He could see it now, in the subtle delay between her parries, in the way her shoulders lifted higher with each breath. Her strikes still came fast, but not flawless. She fought like someone who had never expected a challenge to rise from the ashes, someone whose throne had never before been questioned. His own arms ached, every movement drawing pain from old wounds reopened in this relentless dance. But pain was familiar, pain he could harness. He had trained not for glory, but for this moment, this reckoning. Valira slashed high, pivoted low, and nearly caught his calf. He twisted away, answering with a brutal overhead swing that dented her pauldron. She staggered back, and Kaelus pressed forward, each strike an echo of the punishment she once dealt him. "I see it now," he said between breaths. "You're not a god, just a woman behind a name." "And you're still beneath me," she spat, teeth bared. She surged, fury renewing her limbs. Their swords clashed, locked, and for a heartbeat they stood there, forearms trembling, eyes boring into each other. Sweat dripped from Valira's brow. Her breath was ragged now, shallow and quick. Kaelus leaned in. "You made me weak once. That mistake won't happen twice." He broke the lock, his elbow slamming into her jaw. She reeled. The crowd gasped. She recovered fast, blade sweeping defensively in an arc. But Kaelus didn't chase. He stepped back, watching her, measuring. She was calculating, too. He could feel it. A fighter of her caliber never fought blindly. But something had changed. The calm precision she once wore like armor had fractured. There was doubt now, tangled with rage. "Why come back?" she asked, voice hoarse. "You could have disappeared. Lived." Kaelus sheathed his sword for half a second, only to toss his helmet away. His face was fully visible now, scarred line, older, but his eyes were steel. Because living without facing you wasn't living. It was waiting. Valira hesitated. Just a blink. But it was enough. Kaelus lunged. Their blades met again, the rhythm now chaotic, no longer elegant or calculated. It was raw, desperate animal. Steel glanced off steel, scraping across armor, biting into flesh. Kaelus took a cut across his shoulder. Valira's wrist bled from a shallow slash. Neither yielded. The ground around them had turned red and muddy, their movements churning the sand into a graveyard tapestry. And yet they moved still, two forces unwilling to break, unwilling to admit that time, like wounds, could not be ignored forever. Then it happened. A parry too slow, a step too far. Kaelus slipped under her guard and drove his knee into her ribs. She cried out, stumbling, and his blade came around, stopping just short of her throat. She froze. The crowd fell silent once more. Valira stood still, sweat streaking her face, sword hanging in her loosened grip. Kaelus' weapon hovered just above her neck, and for a moment it felt like the world stopped breathing. But he didn't strike. He lowered the blade just slightly and stepped back. Valira's brows furrowed. Why? Because this was never about killing you, he said. It was about showing you I'm not yours to discard. She stared at him, the weight of those words settling between them like a third opponent. I could have ended it, he said quietly, but that would have made me what you were, and I'm not here to become you. I'm here to surpass you. Valira looked away for the first time, her shoulders rising and falling in silence. Her sword dropped into the dirt with a muffled thud. Around them, the crowd didn't cheer or chant. They waited, breathless, unsure what they had just witnessed. And then, soft at first, then swelling, a single voice began to chant his name. Kaelus. Then another. Kaelus. More joined, louder, from the nobles to the blood-soaked tears. His name rose like a storm above the sands. Not for victory, not for violence, but for return. Valira looked up at him again, something unreadable in her eyes. Resentment, respect, maybe both. You're not the same man I fought, she said. No, he agreed. That man died in the pit. I buried him myself. She gave a bitter smile. Then maybe you deserve the crowd more than I do. He didn't respond. There was no triumph in his stance, no joy in her submission. What lay between them was not victory, but closure. She turned and walked away, not defeated, but changed. The gates opened for her without command. She passed through them, vanishing into shadow as silently as he had once been discarded into it. Kaelus remained. The crowd still chanted, but he didn't bask in it. He looked up, past the torches and the guards and nobles, toward the sky now blooming with stars. He had come back to confront her, to break free of the chains forged in that moment years ago when she'd thrown him down. And now that moment was over. He stepped away from the center, letting the noise fall behind him. A figure waited near the lower gates. A girl, no older than 12, eyes wide, clutching a wooden training sword too big for her frame. She stared at him like he was myth brought to life. He paused. You want to be a fighter? He asked. She nodded, awestruck. Then remember, he said, lowering his voice, real strength isn't in how hard you strike, but how much you can carry and still rise. She didn't understand fully, not yet, but one day she would. He walked past her and into the dark. Kaelus didn't need the arena anymore, but the world would remember the day he returned, not to seek vengeance, but to reclaim himself.